In 1996, a doom metal band from Moldova named Inferialis released a demo tape including 2 songs, Broken Piece of the Sun and It Was a Yarn. Despite their limited discography, they managed to build quite a reputation for themselves before ultimately splitting up in 1998. But that's not where the story ends. Soon after, 2 members of this band, the vocalist Petru and their keyboardist Dan, would go on to form a Europop group named Ozone. Among this pop group's many accomplishments, perhaps their greatest, was creating the track behind what was perhaps the most famous viral video of the mid-2000s. What I'm talking about, of course, is Numa. So for today's episode, let's take a closer look at Numa, what happened to it, and some little mysteries surrounding its origin that always puzzled me. This video is sponsored by Acorns. Are you trying to save money and invest for the future? If you're not, what's stopping you? Are you afraid that you're gonna make a mistake? You don't know a lot about investing? Or maybe you just don't have a lot of spare cash to invest? All this can be pretty intimidating, and that's where Acorns come in. Acorns make it easy to invest and save every day in the background of your life, using just your own spare change and no expertise required. And you can set up Acorns in less than 5 minutes with as little as $5. You might not even notice it, but over time it can really grow. You can automatically invest spare change from everyday purchases, or you can set up recurring investments. Acorns use diversified portfolios set up by experts to help you get more exposure to the markets, and that takes out a lot of the guesswork. And it's trusted by leading innovators and investors like PayPal and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Just go to acorns.com/wang and download Acorns to start investing your spare change. You can get a $10 bonus investment if you use my link to set up an account. Terms and conditions apply. Believe it or not, I've actually been enjoying TikTok for the past year or so. I mean, for sure there's a lot of absolute garbage on there, but you use a little bit and the algorithm figures out what you want to watch pretty quickly. And it's fun to be able to make different kinds of content that don't really fit on this channel. That being said, one thing that I never understood with TikTok, the whole lip syncing thing. I just don't understand the appeal of mouthing yourself, singing songs, or even more like lip syncing, mouthing yourself, doing dialogue for movies and shit like that. But then I got to thinking about how that sort of content has a pedigree that goes back way further than TikTok or even Musical.ly. I'm talking all the way back to 2004. It was that year that a fella named Gary Brolsma, who had a reputation of whipping up kooky videos for his friends, had another one up his sleeve. Numa. A video that in some way is kind of like the first TikTok. Featuring, of course, Gary dancing and lip-syncing to the Moldovan pop song Dragostea din Ta by Ozone. He never intended for anybody to see this outside of his group of friends. But then one day, a week after he made it, he decides to upload it to Newgrounds for shits and giggles. He figures it'll get downloaded to oblivion, never to be seen again. Of course, as you most certainly know, he was very wrong. It accumulates millions and millions of views, eventually becoming the Guinness Book of World Records holder for the most popular internet video, spawning several imitations and parodies of its own, each of them often gaining millions of views on their own. And this all propels Gary to being, at this point in time, the most famous guy from a meme. But before we get to the rest of Gary's story, there's something else that's always puzzled me about this. Despite the song not having been popular in the US before the Numa meme, despite me having no connection whatsoever to Moldova or Romania, I knew that I had heard this song before that. If I recall correctly, at the time, I was a big fan of J-pop groups like Morning Musume and all their little offshoots. I know, I'm a huge weeb, we've gone over this before. And somehow I had downloaded this song, the Numa song, Dragostea din Ta, as part of a collection of J-pop songs. It doesn't make much sense because, Romania is not a part of Japan. But thinking about it, it was also likely to me that Gary, also an American with no connection to Moldova, but also a person who is presumably very online, probably found the song in a similar way. But how exactly does this happen? So, after exiting the Moldovan metal scene in 1998, Dan Balin, formerly of the doom metal band Inferialis, creates his pop group Ozone because, believe it or not, he likes money, and it works. I mean, the first album does kinda whatever, but then they move to Bucharest, Romania, and the second album kills it. This leads to their third album, Disco Zone, which contains Dragostea din Ta, at release in 2003, their biggest hit to date. #1 in Romania, and it gets releases all across Europe and eventually makes its way to Japan, where it's known as Koi no Mayahi. And with that Japanese release, this song has its first entanglement with meme culture on Japan's 2-channel image board. So on 2-channel, there is a cat meme, Mona. Even if you're not Japanese, it's very possible that you've seen it around. And part of the character's popularity involved dance animations set to music. One such animation will be made by a user named Ikari using Koi no Mayahi. And as it turns out in a later interview, Gary did reveal that he had first heard the song in a Japanese cat animation, vindicating my theory of the weeb to Numa pipeline. But that reveal was much further down the line, as initially after the popularity of Numa, Gary wasn't so inclined to do interviews. When Numa popped off, it almost felt kind of like a sequel to the Star Wars Kid, which had gone viral a year prior. Hell, Gary and the Star Wars Kid even kind of looked a bit alike. And if you watched my Star Wars Kid video, you know that the Star Wars Kid wasn't too happy about that meme. In fact, he hated it and wanted to do whatever he could to escape from it. And at first, Gary was in the same boat. In an article by the New York Times shortly after the video blew up, it discusses how Gary spent his time moping around his house, having canceled all the appearances he was initially happy to make. These days, Mr. Brolsma shuttles between the house and his job at Staples, his family said. He is distraught, embarrassed. His grandmother, Margaret Telkis, quoted him as saying just the other day, "I want this to end." It puzzled a lot of the people around him because previously he was always making videos trying to entertain people. For example, they mentioned these parodies of Prozac commercials that he used to make, which I guess is at this point a piece of Numa lost media. Perhaps it was a case of the dog who finally caught the car and didn't know what to do with it. But his friends and family were encouraging him to try and live this up. One of his friends told him, "This is your one chance to be famous, embrace it." While his grandfather simply remarked, "I don't know what's wrong with him." A comment from Gary's friend Randall would highlight another aspect of the story. "He's been entertaining us for years," he said. So, it's kinda like the rest of the world is realizing that Gary can make you smile. And over the course of the next year, it was this sentiment that would prevent the story from being Star Wars Kid Part 2. When retelling the course of the year after Numa, Gary would mention that it was messages from fans that helped pull him out of this funk. In particular, he recalled a message from a soldier in the Middle East who had mentioned how Numa had helped brighten up his mood. And through that, Gary realized that this isn't something he should be trying to run away from, but rather something he should embrace. And thus, he decided to lean back into it, leading to his return in September of 2006. That's when he released Numa, aka Numa 2. This song, written by a songwriter named Chad Russell in Russian with lyrics that are about a children's song about a hunter and a bunny, lays the base for Gary to Numa once again, now with cameo appearances by the members of his band, the Nowadays, who had themselves just released a pair of songs on MySpace. I'm not gonna lie, when this song first came out, it kind of felt like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer bowls a perfect game and he just can't let it go. But in the years following the release of this song, I've found that the new Numa, hey, like that gets stuck in my head way more than the original song does. Gary also held a $45,000 Numa contest in which it was up to the viewers to create their own Numa videos to go with the new Numa. It would receive 328 entries in total, with the grand prize winner Keith3D, who actually bears a little bit of a resemblance to Gary himself, creating a video with stop-motion animation of pretzels and various household objects. And in the coming years, Gary would expand his scope outside the realm of music. It was on October 1st of 2008 that Gary would announce the next phase of his career with this video.
Don't do it. Oh no. Ow.
Ladies and gentlemen, comedy is saved. The Numa Network has arrived. And now it wasn't just Gary, but Gary and friends. A cast of characters like Dr. Depend, Christy Storms, and Tobias. In fact, most of the Numa Network videos involve these other characters with only occasional appearances by Gary. And of course, predictably, the Gary videos were by far the most viewed ones on the channel. By 2010, Gary was speaking in interviews about how he wanted to expand the scope of the Numa Network, creating a site that was something he compared to Funny or Die, or College Humor. And indeed, a website was created containing articles and celebrity interviews and stuff like that, although not much of it has been archived. All things considered, I think it's actually pretty impressive how long he kept the ball rolling on this. It remained active until 2013, with the last official Numa Network video being a very brief interview with James Hong. I mean, I think to go from owning literally the most viewed video that existed online to, you know, a few thousand views here and there, I think most people would give up in a week or less. But Gary kept this project going for 5 years. But it makes sense when you remember that before Numou, this was a guy who's just happy to make videos that only his friends were ever supposed to see. Then there's a little bit of a weird shift from that point on. The channel suddenly becomes something called Dork Daily, beginning with a sketch called How to Use a Public Restroom. Then there's an interview with Malcolm in the middle, and a few years passed until their next sketch in November of 2016, the top 5 ways to change your Facebook friends' political positions. This obviously got much more of a reaction, especially with it being 2016, with people wondering why Numa is suddenly doing politics. People had theories that the channel had been hacked or stolen or purchased by some kind of mega corporation, but Dork Daily replied to such comments, directing people to Gary's current website and saying that this project was a labor of love that didn't make any money, nor was it intended to. And in fact, the Dork Daily iteration of the Numa Network still continues to this day, with several videos released the month of me making this video, and with a website containing general geek culture news and editorials. As for Gary himself, he's still pretty actively making music, including new songs by the Nowadays, a solo album entitled Haunted House of Pancakes, and probably my favorite of the stuff he's produced, these videos on YouTube that are represented just by a Shrek picture and an emoji. These songs have a very Super NES type feel. In particular, they remind me a lot of Tokimeki Memorial or Sailor Moon Another Story, so if that's your vibe, definitely worth checking out. Oh, and how could I forget, of course, there's a Numa NFT. It was sold in June of 2021 by NetGems. In a brief interview with BuzzFeed, he explains that despite the massive popularity of Numa, like a lot of other early internet stars, he barely made any money at all throughout the years off of this. And he mentioned that currently his family was struggling with financial issues and health issues, so he was hoping that the NFT could help them make ends meet. Ultimately, this NFT would sell to a user named Worth for 3.15 Ethereum, which at the time of me making this video is a little over $4,000. Worth is now trying to sell the Numa NFT for 420 Ethereum, a little over $1.7 million. Not sure how that's gonna work out, but we'll see. In any case, Gary Brolsma, the Numa guy, is a rare example of an early internet celebrity who managed to maintain a presence throughout the years without completely losing his mind, so hats off to him and good luck to his family. But anyway, that's the story for now. If you like this video, check out my video about the God Warrior. I'm out.